Howdy folks, this is Big Sam. Today I've got 3 Finnish Mosins here for you. Let's see what we got. First of all, over here we've got a Finnish M39 rifle produced in 1943 by the Sacco company. Now next up over here we've got a Finnish M91 rifle. This is actually produced here in America by the New England Westinghouse company. Pretty cool. Later used by Finland. And lastly, we've got another M91 rifle. This one's a little bit different though. The barrel was actually produced in Finland by Tikkakoski in 1942. Okay, so what do we have here? We've got Finnish Mosins, we've got 2 M91 rifles. One produced in America, one built in Finland, and then an M39 rifle. So what are we talking about today? Well, specifically, it's this guy here at the very back. It's this M91 rifle. One of the questions that I think doesn't really get asked enough is why did Finland even build these rifles in the first place? Now, we all know that the M39 is like the nicest, most desirable Finnish Mosin variant. These are just beautiful guns. I can't really say enough about them. I mean, they're super accurate. They have nice triggers. The sights on them are just really super nice. You can finally adjust the sights to like 25-meter increments. It's got this really nice semi-pistol grip here. Just beautiful, beautiful rifles overall. Just super, super gorgeous. Now, one of the things is, why didn't Finland build more of these? Why didn't they just say, okay, this is the ultimate Mosin variant that will ever be produced. Let's just switch to using only these. Well, at the same time they were building these, they were also building these older pattern, not really as nice or loved by the troops, M91 long rifles from like a World War I pattern. So why were they building these at the same time they were producing this magnificent work of art here? It's a really good question. Now, to help answer this, I need to make an interesting point. Half of Finland's army at the time was armed with M91 pattern rifles, these long rifles here, not the M39. This would sort of be a minority. Now, they'd get more and more of these as the continuation war ultimately progressed, but still, the majority of their army would have these long M91 pattern rifles, like we see here and here. So this kind of helps us to understand a little bit better why they were building these in parallel with building these. Okay, now Tikkakoski would produce something like a little over 30,000 M91 barrels. But why, right? I mean, we know they had a bunch of these. So Finland got a bunch of these M91 pattern rifles. This one was made in America. They bartered for a lot of them after World War I and the Finnish Civil War of 1918 was over. They decided to adopt this as their standard pattern infantry rifle. Way back in before 1920, they did this. So they had tons of these, and they would buy tons of these, because when they bartered for Mosins, they would get them from other countries. And after World War I, the only Mosin laying around in most places was this M91 pattern rifle. Their super, super long barrel and this old pattern Konovalov rear sight system here, okay? Now, the thing is, because Finland would build up so many of these by the time that this gun was being produced, again, the majority of their army was equipped with these types of rifles. So you kind of have to ask yourself, why would they build these? Well, it kind of makes sense because Finland didn't have that much money dedicated to the military spending, okay? So in a perfect world, they would have just switched to this and built hundreds of thousands of M39 rifles. That just wasn't possible is the problem. You got to understand their economy and really what they had and what they had to work with. And what they had was not a lot of money, but they had a lot of M91 pattern rifles, and more specifically, they had a lot of parts laying around as well. So when Finland would buy all of these guns from Europe in the 1920s and the 1930s, they would also buy a lot of quote-unquote parts guns. They would buy a lot of guns that were really unserviceable. You couldn't shoot it, and maybe the barrel was shot out or something bad happened to it, but you could use all the parts from it. Things like the rear sights, the stocks maybe, the handguards, the barrel bands, the front sights, the cleaning rods, even the sling swivels, sorts of things that are not compatible with the M39 pattern of rifle. These use different sights, cleaning rods, barrel band systems, different stocks, all of that. So they would start amassing a whole bunch of parts, okay? And one of the problems with these M91 rifles was the stocks would warp or crack. So one of the big upgrades Finland did, and you can see it here, they would produce these two-piece stocks. Now this guy, if we look here at our Mosin in question today, this is actually a totally finished produced stock. So they produce two pieces, the front piece and the rear piece, and they would splice it and glue it together here. It does a couple things. One, it makes the stock stronger, but it also makes the stock cheaper to produce. You don't have to have one huge blank. You can get two smaller blanks and fuse them together. So this is the good old Finnish intuition at work here. We're making a stock that's stronger and cheaper. Now you can't really beat that. That's just a fantastic approach there. That was their mindset. And that's really the mindset that you had to have when you didn't have a lot and the only thing you had to work with was dirty old Mosins. So the Finns were just wizards at this sort of thing. Okay, so they have all of these parts they're building up and refurbishing, and they're getting more parts in their inventories, and slowly but surely until the Winter War of 1939 happens. Now remember, in 1939, the M39 actually wasn't around yet. They wouldn't even start producing these things until 1940. Really, you wouldn't see these even starting to be produced in large numbers until 1941, okay? So in the Winter War, you wouldn't really see hardly any M39s. And they had M27s and some Civil Guard rifles that they were trying to produce, but still, the majority of their guns were these M91 pattern long rifles. Okay, now, going back to our point earlier where we talked about how a lot of their army was armed with these rifles, well, if you think about probability and statistics, right? Let's say 20, I don't know, and I'm just going to make up a number here, but let's say 20% of your rifles are going to get destroyed or need to go in for repairs, okay? 20%. Well, if you look at that number as statistics, well, the majority of guns you have are going to be these M91 pattern of rifles, right? Well, if you take that into account, the majority then of guns that are going to come in for repairs or guns that you basically have to salvage and scrap for parts are still going to be these patterns of rifles. And so as the war progressed and more rifles got turned into parts guns or things like that, you would start amassing even more and more parts that you would have to either build or replace or get from somewhere else for these M91 pattern of rifles. And because of this, that's really why we would start to see these good old M91 rifles starting to be produced in the early 1940s. Like this guy by Tikkakoski. Now you'd also see these built by the State Armory marked VKT. I think a little bit more of those were produced in these Tikkakoski rifles. But if you think about this, if you've got a bunch of parts already laying around that are compatible with this system, it kind of makes sense to just go ahead and build some of these because you may not actually need nearly as much time, resources, or money to rebuild a gun into this pattern with a Tikkakoski barrel in an M91 pattern than you would just building a completely new M90 or M39 rifle that doesn't have the same compatible parts. You got to get all of this from scratch. Again, the stock here with the semi-pistol grip, the handguard, There's rear sight base, the front sight base, your barrel bands, these sling swivels, your cleaning rods. All of this stuff, while it's cool, you may not have the time and energy to really dedicate to building a lot of these during the war. So that's really why we would see a ton of these, not even a ton, but you would see a fair amount of these M91 patterns of rifles being produced, even though you've already got this really fancy M39 rifle. So now a lot of collectors may kind of look down on these M91 rifles and say, well, these are inferior to the M39 rifle. Remember, these rifles are really what carried Finland through the wars. This is cool, and these were used, but if you took the M91 rifle away from Finland, it would have had a much more drastic impact on them than if you just, say, took away the M39 rifle, because they were so dependent upon these M91 rifles. These rifles, you know, we can say bad things about them, but these truly were the lifeblood of Finland, and these really helped them retain their independence from Soviet Russia in the 1930s and the 1940s. So while these technically aren't as nice as the M39 rifle, these are overlooked pieces of history that are extremely important. And because of that, we are going to see the values on these go up. Now, right now we're seeing the values on M39s go kind of crazy. These guys, not so much. They're kind of all over the place. What's also crazy is like rifles like this, and this guy is built on actually an antique receiver. So this receiver was used by Russia and who knows who else in World War I and even before that, which is really cool. A lot of cool history here. What's crazy is that some of these rifles are costing about as much as I'm seeing a lot of 9130 rifles sell for. So we'll do another video on why you should buy one of these rifles, but hopefully this clears up why we see these weird M91 pattern rifles being produced by Finland when they were also producing these rifles. It really goes down to logistics and cost and ease of production. So these are really cool rifles, and I hope this maybe helps you guys develop a newfound love and respect for these M91 rifles. So thank you guys for watching. I really hope you enjoyed getting to take a look at some cool finished Mosins. I know I always like to. If you guys ever have any Mosin Nagant questions, I'm definitely no expert, but I'm always happy to give you my opinion, so feel free to email me anytime. I always put my email in the description of of all the videos I make, so feel free to reach out anytime. Let me know if y'all got any prayer requests, and we'll see you next time.